The iron gate of the orphanage was cold, even in the afternoon sun. Marco felt the chill rise up his hand as he pushed it open. In front of him, small and silent, stood Nina, his 6-year-old daughter. The smell of disinfectant and reheated food coming from the building was strong, a smell of neglect. He knelt down, his knee cracking on the stone floor. In his hand, he held a small wooden bird, smooth and worn by time. He placed it in Nina's hand. Her fingers did not close around the object. She just stared at a spot on the wall, humming a low, repetitive melody, her only response to a world she did not understand. "Be a good girl, Nina," he whispered, his voice breaking. He stood up, turned his back, and walked away without looking back, each step a hammer blow to his chest. The sound of the heavy gate slamming shut was final. It was the sound of a life being left behind. "Hello. Which city are you watching us from today? We want to feel your presence with us. If you want to find out how a father's most painful act became the first step towards his daughter's salvation, and how a teacher who couldn't see the world was the only one who could see this girl's soul, stay here. Subscribe to the channel, because Nina's journey is one of those that remind us that light sometimes comes through the most unexpected cracks. To understand why Marco left his daughter at that gate, we need to go back a year in time, to the deafening silence that settled in his home after the death of his wife, Laura. Laura was Nina's translator. She understood the language that was not made up of words. She knew that the rapid buzzing meant hunger, and that the slow tapping of fingers on the table was a sign of sleepiness. Laura saw the music in her daughter's soul. Without her, Marco was lost in a foreign country without a map or a dictionary. He loved Nina with an intensity that suffocated him, but his love was useless, unable to break through the wall of silence that separated them. The nights were the worst. He tried to read to her, but Nina's eyes remained empty. He tried to hug her, but her body remained rigid. The only response he got was the humming, a melody that sounded like an accusation to him. His family and the few friends he had left began to offer advice. "She needs specialized help, Marco. You can't do this alone. Maybe a place with others like her would be better." At first, he rejected the idea with fury. Abandon his daughter? Never. But exhaustion is a slow poison. Loneliness erodes determination. He began to look at himself in the mirror and see a failure. A man who couldn't make his own daughter happy. The terrible idea began to disguise itself as logic, as sacrifice. "I'm not abandoning her," he told himself. "I'm giving her a chance I can't give her." His outburst was not one of anger, but of deep pain and complete surrender. He wasn't leaving a daughter he didn't love. He was leaving a daughter he loved so much that he couldn't bear to see her waste away beside him. Marco's distorted hope that the orphanage would be a solution vanished as soon as the gates closed. For Nina, the place was sensory assault. The long corridors echoed with screams and cries, amplifying the chaos of the world. The caregivers, overworked and poorly trained, saw her as just another difficult case. The quiet one, some called her, not out of malice, but out of lazy labeling. The routine was strict and impersonal. Time to eat, time to sleep, time to sit quietly in the concrete courtyard. Nina's humming, her only form of self-regulation, was constantly suppressed. "Stop that noise, girl," one of the inspectors would say. The tapping of her fingers on the table was seen as a challenge, and her hands were often held or forced to remain still. The false hope of a specialized environment was, in fact, a system that demanded absolute conformity. Nina, who already lived in her own world, withdrew even further. Her humming grew quieter, almost inaudible. Her fingers fell still. She spent hours curled up in a corner, clutching the little wooden bird her father had given her, the last remnant of a world that, painful as it was hers. The orphanage was not helping her. It was slowly erasing her day after day. The silence her father couldn't bear was becoming absolute, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the silence of emptiness. Nina's conflict wasn't with a person, but with the indifference of a system. There were no soap opera villains at the orphanage. There was Donna Alice, an older caregiver who saw the sadness in Nina's eyes and tried to connect with her. She would bring her candy, a new toy, but her attempts were based on the language she knew. Words, smiles, eye contact. For Nina, it was just more noise, another demand she didn't know how to fulfill. Donna Alice's frustration grew. "I try, but she doesn't respond. It's like talking to a wall, she vented to her colleagues. The conflict also came from the other children. To them, Nina was the stranger. They stole her wooden bird to see if she would react, poked her to try to get a word out of her, any word. Nina did not react with anger. She simply shrank, becoming even smaller, even more invisible. Her inability to defend herself in the way they understood was seen as weakness, inviting further provocation. Nina's struggle was silent and invisible. It was the struggle of a soul communicating on a frequency that no one there could tune into in an environment that only valued what could be seen and heard in a conventional way. It was the deepest loneliness, being surrounded by people and yet being completely alone. Change came on a gray day in the form of a new volunteer music teacher. Her name was Helena. She moved with a calmness and certainty that contrasted with the hustle and bustle of the place. Guided by a long white cane, Helena was blind. To the children and staff, she was a curiosity, perhaps even an object of pity. But to Nina, she would be a revelation. Their first encounter took place in the recreation room. Nina was hiding under a table as usual, humming a melancholic and complex melody. A caregiver tried to force her out. "Leave her," said Helena's soft voice. The other people in the room fell silent, watching. The blind teacher did not approach the table. She sat down on the floor a few feet away, tilted her head, and simply listened. Her eyes could not see the cowering girl, but her ears picked up every note, every variation in tone in Nina's humming. After a minute of intense listening, Helena did something no one had ever done before. She closed her eyes and began to hum as well. But she didn't imitate Nina's melody. She created a second voice, a perfect harmony that intertwined with the girl's song. Under the table, Nina's hum faltered for a moment, surprised, and then it returned, louder, responding to the harmony. For the first time in her life, someone wasn't trying to silence her. Music. Someone was singing along. In that moment, a bridge was built over the abyss of silence made not of words, but of pure sound. It was a silent turning point, but one that echoed like thunder in Nina's life. From that day on, music became the official language between Helena and Nina. The victories were small, but each one was a miracle. The first came when Helena brought a box of percussion instruments to the orphanage. While the other children banged on the drums with chaotic enthusiasm, Nina hesitantly approached a small wooden xylophone. Her fingers, which had previously only drummed on the table, now danced across the colorful keys. She didn't play a simple children's song. She played the same complex melody that had been buzzing in her head, now with clarity and resonance. The other children stopped to listen, captivated. Nina's annoying noise had turned into music. The second victory was tactile. Helena began teaching Braille to the blind children at the neighboring orphanage and decided to show Nina. She didn't expect Nina to read, but thought the texture of the dots might interest her. The interest was immediate. Nina's sensitive fingers explored the pages with intense concentration. A week later, Helena found Nina in the courtyard, writing on the dusty ground. With her fingertips, she drew the Braille patterns. She was forming the word bird in reference to her wooden toy. She couldn't speak, but she had found a way to write. The biggest victory came during a rare party at the orphanage. The loud music and crowds overwhelmed Nina. Instead of cowering in a corner, she ran to the music room, where Helena had left an old piano. She began banging on the keys, creating a cacophony of dissonant chords that was the perfect translation of her anxiety. Helena followed her, not to tell her to stop, but to sit down next to her on the bench. With gentle touches on her shoulder and playing low, calming notes on the piano, she helped Nina transform the chaos into a powerful and expressive piece of music. Nina was no longer just surviving her emotions. With Helena's help, she was learning to turn them into art. It was night at the orphanage. The silence was now filled with the distant sound of the piano, where Nina played softly. Helena was in her small room reflecting. The world had always seen her for her disability, for what she lacked, but she knew that her blindness was, in many ways, a different way of seeing. Losing her sight had forced her to develop her other senses to an extraordinary level. She didn't see the world. She heard it, touched it, felt it in its vibrations. She thought of Nina. Everyone saw a different girl, a broken girl who didn't speak, didn't look, didn't react as expected. They were so focused on what their eyes showed them, or didn't show them, that they became deaf to Nina's true communication. Helena, on the other hand, was not distracted by the absence of eye contact or words. Her blindness filtered out all the visual noise and allowed her to tune in directly to Nina's essence. Music. What was meaningless noise to others was a language rich in emotion and complexity to Helena. She realized the profound irony of the situation. People with perfect vision were blind to who Nina really was, and she, the blind woman, was the only one who could see the girl in her entirety. Seeing, she concluded, has nothing to do with the eyes. True vision is the ability to perceive the unique light that each soul emits, no matter how subtle or unconventional it may be. Her supposed weakness was, in fact, her greatest strength, and it was this strength that allowed her to find the key to unlock the extraordinary beauty trapped within Nina's silence. 5 years passed. Marco never forgave himself, but he learned to live with the ghost of his decision. His hair now had gray strands and his shoulders carried a permanent weight. He kept his distance, but he never stopped following the orphanage from afar, calling anonymously to find out if the girl who arrived 5 years ago was doing well. One day he read a note in the local newspaper about a small talent recital at the orphanage, mentioning a prodigious young pianist. His heart stopped. With trembling hands and his soul in pieces, he went. He sat at the back of the hall, a stranger among the families and staff, and then she walked onto the stage. Nina. She was no longer the small, cowering girl. She was a preteen with a calm and serious demeanor. She sat down at the piano, and at her side, her teacher Helena gave her an encouraging smile. Nina began to play. The music that flowed from her fingers was breathtakingly beautiful, full of melancholy, but also of incredible strength. In the middle of the complex piece, Nina paused and inserted a simple, almost childlike melody. Marco held his breath. It was the song he used to whistle to her when she was a baby, the melody of the wooden bird. Silent tears streamed down his face. It was a message, a memory, perhaps forgiveness. When the recital ended, Marco did not rush to the stage. He knew he had no right to. The road back was long, but he waited outside, and when Helena came out, he approached her. "I'm Nina's father," he said, his voice breaking. Helena showed no surprise. She just smiled, a smile that seemed to know the whole story. "I know," she replied. "She talks about you, in her music." The pain of abandonment was not erased, but the hope for a new form of connection, slowly and carefully built, was born that night. Sometimes you have to close your eyes to really see. Nina and Helena's story shows us that the most disabling disabilities are not those of the body, but those of perception. If this story touched your soul, if it made you believe in the power of human connection, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Someone, somewhere, may be in need of a little hope today, and your interaction could bring that light to them.